Dionne. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing
Hi.
today?
Hi, Kayla. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the important reporting you all are doing.
Thank you. I don't know if we've introduced you, but as the president of community engagement at the Environmental Defense Fund, um, tell us a little bit about your role. What does it mean to lead community engagement at a huge national green organization?
Well, thank you. And you gave me a big promotion. I'm actually Associate Vice President. But what it means is, we are leading the work in our organization to try and ensure that our organization, which is considered one of the big greens, is being thoughtful about being inclusive of community voices and the knowledge and the experience that um, the input that the lived experience brings, as we're celebrating Earth Day, which is just such a, exciting opportunity to take part in collective action to protect the planet and stabilize our community. I think foundational to all of that, we must also focus on safeguarding public health. And so that's a big part of what we do. We also do a lot of work both with frontline community organizations as well as civic leaders. So we are working with them directly in trying to help them make decisions and help inform them. You all were just talking about sports. We're working on a project with some communities. DC is one of them, and looking at some of the data health initiatives and data health markers from monitors, et cetera, and what that looks like and how it impacts their decision making. And one of the southern states that we're working, or southern communities we're working with, wanted to look at that as it relates to their football fields. Are, the members of their community that participate in those sports safe when they're doing that? And so, that's just a little bit of an example. We try and build tools and resources and add capacity and value to our partners and integrate the community experience and value as we are proposing solutions for climate and environmental issues.
So you do this kind of work, working with communities on environment all year round. So can you share a little bit about what's the importance of Earth Day? Why is it helpful to have like maybe this day or month of specific focus to organize around?
I think it's important because there are some of us who do focus on this all year round, but there are a number of people who maybe don't. So it's an opportunity to celebrate the collective action and the wins that have been made and the progress that has been made. But there is also more to do. So it's an opportunity, to come together in celebration and action and spotlight and empower people to more action and make them aware of, I think best practices, what we see in other communities that are working well that maybe they can adopt. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's opportunities for partnership and just sharing the importance of community voices being engaged and letting their community leaders know what's important to them and what the pain points are. Is there pollution that's impacting the community and driving asthma and other outcomes? And so I think all of those things are important. So it's, like was said, it's an opportunity to celebrate, it's an opportunity to educate, and I think it's an opportunity to empower.
You talked a little bit in there about like partnerships, collaborations, helping communities connect with one another to not reinvent the wheel, build on each other's work. Can you maybe share a couple examples on how that works or what that looks like, especially if there are any in the DMV area, but doesn't have to be?
Certainly. Well, we are, like I said, our work covers both direct community, frontline community engagement, as well as civic engagement, so that those community leaders, the mayors specifically, can be informed and make thoughtful investments and decisions that reduce the burden. And so we're working with DC, we're working with Baltimore. We have a strong partnership with the African American Mayors Association. And so we do a lot of work with them. Some of it in this project I'm talking about with DC and Baltimore and Baton Rouge and others is really looking at health data. Some of the communities are focused more on heat. Some of them are focused on ground level emissions. So it's particular to each community and their needs and interests. But we are working with Harvard and with some of the HBCUs that are local to those communities to drive data that can help inform decisions. We've also worked with a number of communities that are looking at trying to secure funding from the federal government. We have this once in a lifetime opportunity for such great amount of funding to help bring these solutions to bear, and especially in communities that need it most. And we do roundtables, but then we also do provide support, especially in Texas and Louisiana. We are working on trying to reduce the impacts of the petrochem industry, which relates directly to this thing of Earth Day as it relates to plastics and the impact of plastics. And a lot of people don't realize that we're really focused on reducing oil and gas in the power sector and transportation, but oil and gas is the main feedstock in plastics as well. So, you talked a little bit about what DC is proposing in the newscast. But upstream, the communities that live around those plants where plastics are actually created, they face just an outsized burden, both from a safety factor as well as emissions. EPA has recently done an amazing job in updating a number of rules that will make it more protective and make those processes more transparent. But we work to try and provide resources on a scientific and legal basis to those communities, creating tools to help them and co-creating solutions that are really keeping local priorities in the forefront of trying to make scalable solutions that can tackle the climate crisis in the long run.
That is such a good point. I do think so this year's global international official Earth Day theme is, planet versus plastics. And I do think people tend, especially if you don't live in one of these communities, think about oh, what's the problem with plastic? Well, it's in the rivers, it's everywhere. And that's, on our side of it. But it's really every part of the process of making plastics, using plastics and the chemicals that end up in our bodies as we use these, various containers and eat out of them, and then the waste that ends up all over our environment. And I bet, just as a quick shout out for later in the episode, Michelle Roberts from the Environmental Justice Health Alliance will probably talk a lot about this as well. And if you want to learn more, you should come to the Washington Informer Bridge Salon next week. But I guess in thinking about plastics in particular and their ubiquitousness and how dangerous they are at every point of their use, that kind of leads me to question, how far can community engagement go? What is it, what are the biggest challenges in tackling these seemingly overwhelming systemic issues?
So there are a number of opportunities. There are a lot of requirements for community engagement in some of the funding processes that are related to the infrastructure bills and some of those investments. But we see really important grassroots actions making a real difference. I think we've seen it in DC related to some of the industrial facilities that you all have reported on. And we are seeing it, the Beyond Petrochemical campaign that Bloomberg is leading, and they fund some of our work and a number of communities fighting some of this massive expansion of these chemical facilities, these petrochemical facilities, because again, as we transition from oil and gas and electric and transportation, there is sort of this shift in the business model, and there is just significant increase in proposed facilities, and they're all very highly concentrated in these communities that already bear exponential burdens from such high concentrations. I'm sure you'll hear more about that from the environmental justice dialogue you're going to have in a little bit. But we have seen some of these communities, one of the partners we work with, Rise St. James, was very successful in winning a sort of a lawsuit against a permit that was issued in Louisiana for a proposed facility. And the judge did rule in their favor and determined that the permit that was issued would not have been protective. And we are seeing more and more opportunities. One of the updated rules from EPA is starting to allow and require more fence line monitoring, et cetera. Making sure your voices are heard, making sure your elected officials know what the priorities are, where the pain points are. And, sometimes we see facilities that industry will court local elected officials with the promise of economic development and jobs. And you dig in, and a lot of times those jobs are not for the people who are local to the communities. They are brought in jobs. Some of them are only on the upfront construction side, and some of them are so much less than is worth it. And we should never be trading health and the environment for jobs and economic development. They shouldn't be mutually exclusive. And there are ways that we can do things more thoughtfully and more protective. But that takes all of us joining together.
I heard you mention just briefly in there the money from the infrastructure law, and I know there's also money for a lot of different environmental projects in the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you talk a little bit about what community engagement means in respect or regarding the money from those big laws, and also what is EDF's role in terms of helping get money from the big names with lots of people on staff like EDF to smaller organizations that are really on the ground in communities that might not have the capacity to tackle the immensely terrible bureaucratic process of getting that money. So just, that's a big question, but talk me through what does community engagement look like with all this money floating around?
Well, and to be clear, it's tough even for an organization like ours. It's just, and there has to be accountability when there are funds given, and, we understand that, but trying to reduce that administrative burden. Many of the projects, especially money that's coming through EPA, require frontline partners to be more in the driver's seat, and groups like mine can be a partner, but we're not the lead in some of these. So, we are talking to some of our partners, our community partners, and, our local elected officials and the partners that they have identified that they're collaborating with to define how we can add support. Typically, like I said, that is in additional scientific and legal capacity. Sometimes it is working with some of the application processes, et cetera. Our environmental justice team at EDF, we actually have environmental justice and community engagement separate, but they work very directly together. We have an institute that falls under our environmental justice team that awards grants and does help with some of the proposals and applications, the technical assistance. And then they are also working with some of the tic tacs and things of that nature. We are also, my team has worked on some curriculum for educating community members just on the issues. And so there's just a number of different ways. Each community is different in what they're looking for and what they're funding. And then on the flip side of it, you have some of the monies that are more available actually to industry. Some of that money comes from DOE and others, but there are some community engagement criteria in there. there have been some criticisms on whether or not it's strong enough and whether, it's timely enough, but we are trying to push and use our um, opportunities and engagement with those agencies that has been historical to put as strong of guardrails and push for a high bar and a high standard for what community engagement looks like. And it can't just be, okay, there's a seat at the table and we heard what you said and we're going to do what we want anyway. How do we meaningfully integrate the priorities of communities into these processes and design any of these technologies in a way that do not cause secondary harms?
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting conversation. And thanks again to the EDF for sponsoring this episode and our Earth Day edition, which everyone should pick up. It's inside the paper this week, and you should read the paper too. Thanks again, Dionne, and have a great Friday and a great Earth Day weekend.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to hear some of the other segments.